And we start with the build-up to the G20 Summit, set to open in a week's time in China's Hangzhou city. For more on the latest preparations, we are now joined by CCTV's Mangmang in Hangzhou.
Thank you, Beatrice. The city of Hangzhou is now all set for the G20 Summit, which takes place on September 4th and 5th. The summit will host leaders from the G20 member countries, as well as also include non-member states and international organizations. Officials say the facilities for the conference centers are ready, and more than 4,000 volunteers from 14 countries will be on hand to provide support. A multilingual service platform also has been established to offer language services in cases of emergency and conference consultations. And now, to get more discussions into the G20 Summit, let me bring in our guest here. Our guest is Mr. Zhang Weiwei. Well, it's great to have you with us, Mr. Zhang. We mentioned earlier that Senegalese President Macky Sall has been saying, who will be attending the G20 Summit here in Hangzhou, has been saying that Africa would need more aid than it would need more investment than aid. So what kind of role can the G20 play in bringing more investment to Africa, as China as a heavy investor in Africa and also the presidency of the G20 Summit?
Indeed, he's right that actually investment and trade are far more important than aid for Africa or for any developing countries. And after all, aid will be limited, but more will come from other sources other than the governments. As far as China is concerned, China has taken the lead in investing in Africa and also in really building the new infrastructure for Africa, which is crucial for Africa's industrialization. And from my knowledge of this G20, at least China has successfully mainstreamed this UN agenda, 2030 agenda, into the agenda of the G20.
And this agenda aims to provide support and assistance to the least developed countries.
That's one of the major items. And furthermore, there is another focal point concerning what's called the industrialization of Africa, which will be one of the sub-items in the talks within this G20 format.
African countries have high expectations for the G20, as the continent itself is expecting to go through this industrialization process. So how has China prepared Africa in this process, the industrialization takeoff?
China can always help. In the end, it's African people themselves will take initiative and achieve industrialization. But China can do whatever it can. And in this regard, I think it's necessary perhaps for Africa to look at what I call the China model. And China has done, and China has made it. This is crucial. China attracted a lot of foreign investment. China attracted a lot of direct investment. Yet, what's important is China maintained its own policy space, which means that China will decide what kind of investment China should have, what kind of investment not. Actually, with globalization, it's not clear that all countries are successful. Some countries have attracted a lot of investment, but in the end, the economy is controlled by multinationals, which is not encouraging.
China itself is a success story. How can China's experiences be applied to African countries?
It really depends on other countries, including African ones, to draw useful elements from the Chinese experience, from the China model. Actually, the crucial feature of China model is reject what I call market fundamentalism or democracy fundamentalism, to look at things as it is, what we call seeking truth from facts. Neither the Western model has been successful in non-Western countries, nor the Soviet model is successful. So China tried to really breaking a new path for its own development. Eventually, I think all countries, including African ones, will find their own way out.
Well, the choice of Hangzhou as the host city of the G20 Summit really surprised a lot of people. So why not Beijing or Shanghai? What kind of light will this Hangzhou, the city of Hangzhou, shed on the G20 attendees?
Indeed, Hangzhou is extremely well known within China, but less well known outside China. Sometimes people whenever outside China referring to Hangzhou, people will say that it's a city near Shanghai. It's true. But after G20, maybe Hangzhou will become very famous. Actually, it's maybe the capital of China's e-commerce. Yeah. So when we decide on the theme of the G20 as be innovative, be invigorated, this is the case of Hangzhou. Yeah, it's the really in the cutting edge and the frontier of the e-commerce, what we call the digital economy. Yeah, it's really not only in China but also in the world. With one mobile phone, you can do everything.
Exactly. So the idea of innovation is really penetrating in every part of life in Hangzhou. Thank you so much, Professor Zhang Weiwei, for your insight on this.
Pleasure.
That was Professor Zhang Weiwei from Fudan University.